Waitress slipped the CEO a note, "Don't drink it, and leave now." He grabbed her hand and said, "Come with me." The ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria shimmered with opulence. Gilded chandeliers hung like crowns from the vaulted ceilings, casting a soft golden hue over the sea of tuxedos and satin gowns. A string quartet played a gentle waltz in the corner, and laughter echoed beneath the crystal lighting as servers glided through the crowd with silver trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Tonight was a celebration. Heliocyte Technologies had just gone public in one of the most successful IPOs of the decade, and the world was watching. Investors, tech giants, and media elites had gathered to raise their glasses in honor of the company's meteoric rise. At the center of it all stood Jonathan Raines, 32, the enigmatic CEO and founder. Clad in a tailored black tuxedo, he looked every bit the part, confident, composed, magnetic. Yet behind the surface, his eyes told a quieter story. There was exhaustion in the lines at the corner of his mouth, tension in his jaw, years of pressure, of expectations, of fighting to prove himself. Raised in a New Jersey orphanage, Jonathan had fought his way out with nothing but a scholarship, a brilliant mind, and the kind of relentless will that left no room for failure. Now he stood atop the tech world, but even at the pinnacle, he felt something deeper, a disquiet he could not ignore. At the edge of the ballroom, Aurora Lane, 24, moved quietly among the guests, a tray balanced effortlessly on one hand. Her blonde ponytail bounced with every step, neat and professional. But her eyes, green and sharp, held something else beneath the surface. Worry, urgency, fear. She was not just a waitress. She worked nights at the Waldorf to support her 6-year-old sister, Maya, who waited in the staff room just down the hallway, swinging her feet from a bench, dressed in her usual pink dress. Aurora had promised she would be back in time to walk her home after the event. But something had changed tonight. Moments earlier, she had overheard a conversation in the staff corridor, something not meant to be heard. Men talking in hushed, urgent tones about a plan, a name, Jonathan Raines, and a drink. Aurora's hands trembled slightly, but she controlled it. There was no time to hesitate. She moved through the crowd, weaving past guests, her heart pounding in her chest. Jonathan had just stepped toward the podium. His champagne flute was in hand. A toast was coming. Aurora moved faster. Just as he raised the glass, she approached, letting herself stumble slightly. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she gasped, tilting her tray just enough to bump into his arm. The champagne sloshed from his glass, splashing onto the floor and speckling the sleeve of his tuxedo. Jonathan flinched, startled but composed. "I'm terribly sorry, sir," she said quickly, lowering her tray and pulling a cloth from her pocket. She dabbed at his sleeve with one hand, awkward, apologetic. With the other, unseen by all around them, she slipped a small, folded note into his hand. She didn't wait for acknowledgement. She backed away, still apologizing, disappearing into the crowd before he could speak. Jonathan stared after her for a moment, then looked down at the note in his hand. His fingers unfolded it slowly, the paper warm from her touch. 4 words stared back at him in hurried handwriting. "Do not drink. Leave now. They know you found out the truth." The words hit harder than the champagne. His breath caught. He looked up, at the room, at the faces that had just been laughing and smiling and congratulating him. But now, something shifted in his perception. The glances felt longer, the smiles sharper, the air thicker. People were watching him, but not in admiration. It felt colder, calculated. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. It was a stage. And suddenly, Jonathan was the only one who did not know his part in the performance. His fingers closed over the note. His expression remained calm, unreadable. But inside, something had already begun to move. Jonathan's expression did not change. He folded the note slowly, slipped it into his inner jacket pocket, and looked up, scanning the crowd. Then he saw her, the waitress with the blonde ponytail, slipping into the far corner of the ballroom. Without drawing attention, he placed the untouched champagne flute back on the table. Then, Calm and precise, he stepped down from the podium, weaving through clusters of guests. Every move was deliberate, unhurried, as if he were just mingling before his speech. Aurora reached the edge of the room, near the staff corridor, when she felt someone behind her. "Don't turn around," Jonathan said quietly, his voice low and close. "I read your note." Aurora stiffened. Her fingers gripped the tray in her hands. "I need you to come with me," he continued. "We'll talk, but not here." He gently reached for her hand. She looked down, startled, then up at him. His expression gave nothing away, just a small, steady nod. Without speaking, they walked together toward the back of the ballroom. Jonathan wore a faint smile, like a host showing a guest around. Aurora followed, heart pounding. A man in a charcoal suit, one of the board members, stepped into their path, smiling slightly. "Jonathan," he said smoothly. "Sneaking away already?" Jonathan kept his grip on Aurora's hand. "I'll be right back," he replied with a smile. "Just giving my guest here a quick tour." The man glanced at Aurora, raising an eyebrow. "A tour?" Without hesitation, Jonathan stepped closer to Aurora and slipped his arm around her waist. He leaned in as if whispering something flirty. "Too many eyes," he said under his breath. "Not enough air." The man hesitated, then chuckled. "Fair enough. Just don't miss your big toast." Jonathan winked. "Wouldn't dream of it." Aurora offered a faint smile and a tilt of the head, selling the illusion. It worked. No one followed. They slipped through the side doors into a dim hallway leading to the staff area. Music and voices faded behind them. Jonathan's grip tightened slightly. "Where's the service elevator?" Aurora pointed silently. They moved quickly, her steps light, his stride long and steady. Inside the elevator, the doors slid shut with a soft chime. For the first time, they were alone. Aurora leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Jonathan pressed the button for the basement. Silence hung heavy. As the elevator descended, Jonathan turned to her. "Talk," he said. Aurora nodded. Her voice trembled but was urgent. "I overheard two men talking in the VIP lounge behind the ballroom. One of them, I think, is on your board. They mentioned you found something you weren't supposed to. One of them said, 'It ends tonight.'" Jonathan's jaw clenched. "I wasn't supposed to be near there," she said, "but I took a shortcut through the service hallway. The door was open just enough. I didn't hear it all, but one of them said, 'Once he drinks, we move forward.'" Jonathan said nothing, staring at the elevator doors as his mind raced. "I couldn't ignore it," she added quickly. "I didn't know who to trust. I didn't even know if you'd believe me." He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not suspicion, not authority. Gratitude. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. The elevator dinged. The doors opened into the shadowy service corridor below. Jonathan stepped out first, scanned the empty hallway, then looked back at her. "Come on," he said. "We don't have long." The storage room in the basement was dimly lit, its concrete walls lined with folded banquet chairs, unused linens, and crates of bottled water. The low hum of the building's boiler echoed faintly through the space, but all Aurora could hear was her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Jonathan closed the door behind them, locking it quietly. He scanned the room once, then turned to face her. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice low and calm. Aurora nodded, still catching her breath. Her hands twisted nervously in front of her, fingers wringing the edge of her apron. "It happened maybe 20 minutes before the toast," she began. "I was cutting through the back hallway, just trying to save time. There's a shortcut near the kitchen that leads past the VIP lounge. The door to the lounge was open just a crack." Jonathan listened intently, his expression unreadable. "I wasn't trying to eavesdrop," she continued quickly, "but I heard voices, angry, low, so I stopped." She swallowed hard, reliving the moment. There were 3 men inside. 2 I didn't recognize, but the third, I realized it was Mr. Colburn. "I've seen him at the hotel before. He's on your company's board, isn't he?" Jonathan gave a slow nod. Vice Chairman. Been with Heliosite since the beginning." Aurora's voice dropped to a whisper. "They were talking about you." His jaw tightened. One of the men said. She paused, trying to recall the exact words. He said, "He thinks he can hide the internal report at home? It all ends tonight. That champagne will be his last." Jonathan didn't react, but his gaze sharpened. Then the other one said something like, "We'll sign the new contracts the moment he's gone. If we don't move now, everything he uncovered will destroy us." Aurora shook her head. I didn't understand what they meant at first, but it was clear they were planning to get rid of you. Tonight. A heavy silence settled over the room. Jonathan turned away, bracing his hands on the edge of a storage shelf. He exhaled, slow and long. "I knew something was wrong," he said quietly. "I just didn't realize how far they'd go." He straightened and looked at her, his voice steady. "About a week ago, I was reviewing a quarterly audit when I noticed some inconsistencies in one of our subsidiary accounts, specifically a charity branch we set up 3 years ago." He paced slowly, as if organizing his thoughts aloud. "On the surface, everything checked out, but the deeper I looked, the worse it got. Fake vendors, inflated expenses, money meant for outreach and medical grants, siphoned off into private accounts." Aurora's eyes widened. "By Mr. Colburn?" "I do not have definitive proof, yet," Jonathan replied. "But I traced enough of the paper trail to know this wasn't just negligence. It was deliberate." He paused, then added, "I was planning to take it to the board next week. I thought I had time to build the case." Aurora stepped closer, her voice shaking slightly. "But someone found out." Jonathan gave a slow, grim nod. 3 days ago, I got an anonymous message. Just one sentence. "Drop it, or you'll regret it." I thought it was just a threat. Empty words. I've had worse thrown at me over the years. He looked down at the floor, his voice softening. I underestimated how much was at stake, and how far they'd go to protect it. Aurora's hands were still trembling. "If I hadn't overheard them—" "You did," Jonathan interrupted gently. "You acted. You warned me. That alone might have saved my life tonight." Their eyes met. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of what had almost happened pressing in from all sides. Somewhere above them, the sound of music still echoed faintly from the ballroom. But down here, in this hidden corner of the hotel, the air was colder, the stakes infinitely higher. "We cannot go back up there," Aurora whispered. "No," Jonathan agreed, "but we are not going to run either." He reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded note she had given him. "This changes everything," he said. "Now we move carefully, and we move together." Jonathan stood still for a long moment, processing everything Aurora had just told him. The room around them felt tighter now, as if the walls themselves understood the weight of the truth. "We cannot stay here," he finally said. "We need to get you out of this building." Quietly, Aurora looked down, nervously twisting her fingers. I can't leave yet," she said. "My sister, Maya, she's waiting for me at the back entrance. I told her I'd be done by 10. Jonathan's expression softened. "She's here? In the hotel?" Aurora nodded. "She always comes with me when I work night shifts. I don't have anyone else to watch her." He looked toward the door, his voice now calm but decisive. "Then we go get her. Now." He led Aurora through a series of narrow service corridors, bypassing the main elevator shafts and security stations. Every corner they turned felt like a new risk, every echo behind them a possible danger. But Jonathan remained composed, his presence grounding Aurora even as her heart raced. At the end of one hallway, they reached the emergency stairwell. Jonathan pushed open the heavy steel door and motioned for her to go first. The stairwell was dim and industrial, smelling faintly of dust and old concrete. They descended in silence, footsteps soft and urgent. At the bottom, he led her through the employee-only exit that opened into the narrow alley behind the hotel. The air outside was sharp and cold, and Aurora's breath rose in small clouds. "There," she whispered, pointing to the far end of the alley. A small figure sat on a bench tucked into the shadows, legs swinging, wearing a pink dress that stood out like a petal in the dark. "Maya," Aurora called gently, breaking into a light jog. The little girl looked up, beamed, and ran toward her sister, arms outstretched. "I was starting to get cold," she said, her voice light and innocent. Jonathan followed behind, silent, watching them. Aurora bent down and hugged her sister tightly. When she looked up, Jonathan was already removing his tuxedo jacket. Without a word, he knelt in front of Maya, draped the jacket around her small shoulders, and gently pulled it snug. "Sorry we're late," he said, his voice soft and warm, "but your sister just did something very brave." Maya looked up at him with wide eyes. "Is she in trouble?" "No," he smiled. "She helped someone. She helped me." Maya blinked, then nodded solemnly, as if she somehow understood more than her years allowed. She reached out and took Jonathan's hand, small fingers wrapping around his. Aurora stood motionless for a moment, overwhelmed. The cold night, the fear, the uncertainty, all of it had crushed down on her shoulders for so long. And yet here was this man, powerful, composed, and now crouched beside her sister, treating them like they mattered. No one had ever done that before. Jonathan stood, gently lifting Maya into his arms. "We're not going home just yet," he said, looking at Aurora, "but you're both safe now." She nodded, unable to speak, her throat thick with emotion. Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He stepped a few feet away, dialing quickly. "Mark, it's me," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "I need you, right now, no questions. Back alley entrance of the Waldorf." He paused, listening. "Yes, and bring your bag. We may not have long." He hung up and turned back to them. "A friend of mine is on his way, someone I trust. He used to be NYPD, left the force a few years ago, got tired of the red tape. He's a private investigator now, smart, careful. Name's Mark Dalton." Aurora nodded slowly. "And you trust him?" "With my life," Jonathan said. She looked at him, really looked. For the first time, her eyes met his without fear, without distance. Something unspoken passed between them, something simple and human. Trust. And maybe the beginning of something even more. The black SUV rolled quietly through the Manhattan streets, away from the glittering lights of the Waldorf Astoria and into quieter neighborhoods. Aurora sat in the back seat with Maya curled against her, already dozing off beneath Jonathan's jacket. Jonathan sat beside them, silent, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. They arrived 20 minutes later at a modest brownstone nestled between two towering glass buildings. It was the kind of place that went unnoticed, a structure with charm but no extravagance. Jonathan led them up a narrow staircase and unlocked the door to a second-floor apartment. "Here," he said softly. "You'll be safe." Aurora stepped inside and paused. She had imagined glass walls, high-tech panels, maybe even a private elevator. But instead, the space was surprisingly simple. Warm wood floors, shelves filled with books and framed photographs, a worn leather couch, and soft lighting. It felt lived in, not staged. She looked at him with new eyes. "This doesn't look like a billionaire's place," she murmured. Jonathan gave a faint smile. "That's because it isn't. It's mine." He gestured toward the hallway. "The guest room is down there. You can put Maya to bed if you'd like." Aurora nodded and carried her sleeping sister down the hall. Jonathan waited until the door closed before moving to a cabinet near his desk. He reached behind a row of books and pressed a small latch. A panel slid open, revealing a small wall safe. He dialed in the code, paused for a second, then opened it. Inside was a stack of folders, neatly labeled, along with a flash drive and a leather-bound notebook. He pulled out the top folder and placed it on the desk. Aurora returned a few minutes later, looking quieter, more composed. She watched as Jonathan sat and opened the folder, spreading out several pages. "These," he said, tapping the papers, "are copies of internal audits from our subsidiary offices. One in particular, a charitable foundation we launched 3 years ago, raised too many red flags. He slid one sheet toward her. Aurora leaned over, scanning the page. "There's a pattern," he continued. "Payments to shell companies, vendors who don't exist, funds earmarked for cancer research being redirected to operating expenses that can't be accounted for. Over $5 million. Gone." Aurora's brows furrowed. "Who signed off on these?" Jonathan hesitated. Colburn and two others who likely never questioned the numbers. The reports were doctored. Subtle, but the discrepancies are there, if you know where to look. He pulled out the flash drive next. "I was going to present all this next week during the board's private review. I wanted to have everything airtight. The legal team was preparing documents. I even hired an external firm to confirm my findings." Aurora sat across from him, her voice quiet. "But someone found out." Jonathan nodded slowly. "And decided it would be easier if I disappeared before I could speak." He sat back, exhaling through his nose. "You showing up tonight, it changed everything. If you hadn't warned me, I would have taken that drink. And this," he motioned to the papers, "would have died with me." Aurora looked at the documents, then back at him. "So, what now?" He met her eyes. "Now we finish what I started." She nodded. Outside, the city carried on, horns blaring, lights flickering, lives rushing past each other in anonymous streams. But in that quiet apartment, under the soft light of a single desk lamp, something important was happening. Two strangers were becoming allies, not by chance, by choice. 2 days later, the boardroom on the top floor of Heliosite Technologies was filled with attention disguised as confidence. The emergency meeting had been called by Vice Chairman Colburn, an urgent review of transitional leadership in light of Jonathan's unexplained absence. Around the long glass table, familiar faces gathered: directors, legal advisors, department heads, polished shoes, tailored suits, calm expressions masking quiet unrest. Everyone wondered the same thing. Had Jonathan Raines really disappeared, or was he planning something? Colburn called the meeting to order, tapping his fingers on the glossy surface. "Mr. Raines has taken an indefinite leave. We need to move forward. Interim leadership, pending contracts. Let's begin." At the far end of the room, a young woman entered in a catering uniform, carrying a tray of coffee. "Coffee, gentlemen?" she asked politely, her voice soft. No one gave her more than a glance. Aurora, hidden beneath the uniform, moved with practiced grace, setting cups at each seat. Her blonde hair was tucked into a black cap, her eyes cast downward, but she heard everything. Beneath her tray was a small transmitter, and inside the air vent across the room, Mark Dalton's hidden recorder picked up every word. 2 blocks away, inside a nondescript surveillance van, Mark sat with headphones on, monitoring the feed. Next to him, Jonathan leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. Then it happened. Harlan Dent, a legal advisor in his 50s, shifted in his seat and muttered under his breath, unaware his mic picked it up. Even if he has the originals, it's too late. He's probably on a jet or buried somewhere. Someone let out a low chuckle. Another board member added, "If he's smart, he'll stay gone. We've already locked in the votes." Colburn didn't respond, but the hint of a smirk curled on his face. In the van, Mark pressed a small button on the transmitter, a silent signal. Inside the boardroom, Aurora took a slow step back. Then the doors opened. Heads turned. Jonathan Raines stepped inside, calm, composed, and unmistakably alive. The room froze. The air turned to ice. Colburn stood halfway from his chair, pale. "Jonathan, we weren't expecting." "I'm sure you weren't," Jonathan said coolly, striding to the head of the table. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no tie, sleeves casually rolled. He looked every bit the man who had built the company with his own hands. He paused at the end of the table, scanning the room. "Please," he said, "don't get up on my account." No one moved. "I heard concerns about my absence," he said. "Understandable. I needed time to think, to collect a few facts." He set his briefcase on the table, opened it, and slid a thick folder across the glass. "You know," he said, eyes locking with Colburn. It's bold, deciding the future of a company based on the assumption that its founder is either dead or too afraid to return. Colburn tried to speak, but Jonathan raised a hand. No explanations. I've already heard enough. He addressed the full board now, voice calm but firm. This folder contains financial records, email threads, shell account details, and names. Copies have already been sent to federal investigators and our legal counsel, and if needed, the press. A ripple of alarm moved through the room. Jonathan leaned forward, both hands on the table. And in case anyone still thinks this is a bluff, I've sent encrypted copies to 3 independent legal firms. If anything happens to me, this information goes public. He straightened slowly and turned to Colburn. I wanted to believe this company could fix itself from within. I gave people chances. I believed in discretion. He paused, then delivered the final blow, voice low but crystal clear. But the truth didn't die. I didn't die, and neither did the evidence. Silence. The room, once so certain, was now undone, and the balance of power had just shifted. 3 days later, the press conference at Heliosite headquarters drew a full crowd. Cameras lined the back wall, lights blazed from every angle, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters, shareholders, and staff filled the room, some anxious, some hopeful, all waiting for answers. Jonathan Raines stood at the front, composed in a navy blue suit, no tie. To his left, company counsel. To his right, a screen displaying the Heliosite logo and one bold word beneath it: transparency. He approached the podium and scanned the crowd. "Thank you for being here," he began. "I speak today not just as CEO, but as someone who came close to losing everything because I refused to look the other way." He let the silence settle before continuing. "In recent weeks, I discovered serious misconduct within one of our charitable arms. A foundation meant to fund medical outreach had instead been used to divert millions into private accounts, signed off by members of our own board." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. "Using documentation and the support of outside investigators, I've turned over all evidence to federal authorities. Arrests have been made. Heliosite is cooperating fully." Phones buzzed and reporters began typing, but Jonathan kept his gaze steady. This moment isn't only about corruption, it's about courage, about choosing truth when silence feels safer. He paused, then gestured to the edge of the stage. None of this would have been possible without one person, someone who saw something wrong and chose to act. All heads turned as Aurora Lane walked onto the stage. She wore a simple navy dress. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves, her posture composed. Though nervous, she held her chin high. The event host took the mic and smiled. "This is Aurora Lane, a part-time waitress who refused to stay silent. In doing so, she saved not only the life of our CEO, but the future of this company." The room erupted in applause. Aurora hesitated. Then Jonathan held out his hand. She took it. As they stood together, the applause grew louder. There was no hierarchy between them now, just mutual respect. Then Jonathan stepped forward again. From the front row, he reached down and gently lifted a small figure onto the stage. Maya, in her familiar pink dress, clutching a tiny stuffed bear. The room went quiet. Maya blinked under the lights, looking up at Jonathan with wide eyes. He knelt beside her and lowered the mic. "If we want to raise children who are brave, honest, and kind," he said, "we have to show them what that looks like." He looked toward Aurora, then back at the crowd. Sometimes it only takes one voice, one person who says, "This is wrong," when no one else will. He rose to his feet and placed Maya's hand gently in Aurora's. The 3 of them stood side by side, an unlikely trio, united by truth. And in that moment, the applause returned, not out of politeness, but from something real. It was thunderous, rising to fill every corner of the hall. It was applause for truth, for courage, for light, and for the people who choose to see and say what others are afraid to. Spring returned to New York with soft winds and blooming cherry blossoms, brushing color back into the city after a long winter. Life at Heliosite had changed, radically, but for the better. In the weeks following the public revelation, the company launched sweeping reforms. The toxic leadership was gone. Trust, once broken, was slowly being rebuilt. And at the center of it all, Jonathan Rains remained, still CEO, but now a different kind of leader. He no longer led from behind glass walls. He walked the halls. He listened. He shook hands with interns and janitors the same way he did with board members. And when he needed reminding of why he stayed, he often visited the Employee Relations Office, where Aurora Lane now worked, full-time. Aurora had been offered high-profile roles, but she chose the one where she could make the greatest difference, helping entry-level staff, interns, and part-timers, and people just like she had once been, feel seen and heard. She wasn't just good at it. She was extraordinary. Her ability to connect, to sense when someone was struggling or afraid to speak up, made her indispensable. Jonathan once told a colleague, "She has an empathy radar, something you can't teach or program." Meanwhile, Maya thrived. With a full scholarship through Heliosite's new outreach fund, she was attending a prestigious prep school uptown. Still, in her favorite pink dress, she carried a sticker-covered backpack and filled her notebooks with stories, tales of quiet heroes who used their voices, not swords. Inspired by all that had happened, Jonathan took another bold step. He launched a non-profit dedicated to protecting and empowering whistleblowers, people who risk everything to speak the truth. He called it the Echo Project, and he asked Aurora to be his co-founder. At first, she hesitated. "I'm not a leader," she said, but Jonathan smiled. "You already are." He stayed on the board as senior advisor, while Aurora helped shape the mission. Together, they built a network, supporting whistleblowers through legal help, education, and most importantly, a place to be heard. Aurora also found a new voice, through writing. One quiet night, with Maya asleep beside her, she sat down at her laptop and began typing their story. From the spilled champagne to the whispered warning, from fear to truth. She titled the post, "The Note That Changed Everything." It went viral within days. People from around the world shared their own stories in the comments. Stories of courage, regret, and hope. Stories from those who had spoken up and those who wished they had. Aurora hadn't expected it, but Jonathan wasn't surprised. "Truth," he told her, "has a way of echoing." One golden afternoon, as spring leaned into summer, the three of them sat on a park bench beneath the wide shade of a maple tree. Maya sat between them, licking strawberry ice cream, her legs swinging in rhythm with a quiet breeze. Aurora wore a light blue dress. Her blonde hair hung loose, catching the light like strands of gold. Jonathan leaned back, hands folded behind his head, watching the world go by. There was no rush, just stillness. Then Maya looked up and asked, "Do you think everyone will be brave someday?" Jonathan turned to her, then glanced at Aurora. The corners of his mouth lifted. "I think one brave voice," he said, "can help a lot of others find their own." And as the sun dipped low, casting amber light across the grass, his voice echoed softly, closing the chapter with words now etched into hearts everywhere. "They told me to stay silent, but a girl with blonde hair, with nothing but a small piece of paper, reminded me that truth deserves a voice. Thank you for watching this soul-stirring story. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that courage doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers through a folded note, a quiet warning, or a hand held in the dark, then don't forget to show your support. Tap the hype button to help us keep sharing powerful, heartfelt stories like this one. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories and turn on notifications so you never miss the next tale that just might heal, inspire, or change your heart. From all of us here, thank you for believing in the power of truth, kindness, and the human spirit. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave.